And I would just say that patients throw out the scale, please. This is a healing first protocol, and the scale is not going to be a great friend on this journey. And so I really hope that they can just toss that part of it and reach out for community and to just be patient and to keep it simple. It's very, very simple, that you can't get any simpler than this. I think this is why people are so drawn to this.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you, first of all, for doing this. I was reading a little bit about your story. It's pretty fascinating, and it's always I always enjoy doing these sort of success story things. This is why I do what I do. Quite honestly, it's been my passion and what I've done for certainly with regard to diet and like lifestyle for the last half decade, and supposedly as a doctor, that's what I've been supposed to be doing all along. But anyway, Emily, where are you located? First of all.
I'm in Washington State. I'm in the Yakima area.
Oh, well, I'm in Washington State. I'm in Snohomish. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that is. It's not too far from Seattle. So,
yep.
So interesting. Well, tell us a little bit. Just give us your background. Tell us your background and we'll get into your story a little bit.
Sure. So I'm 51 years old. I'm stay-at-home mom. I coach a little bit on Bella's Steak and Butter gang. I do some work with her, work with Raymond Nazon a little bit. But I have been on the roller coaster my whole life. Used bad food, overate, was overweight as a child. And so just had a lifelong struggle with weight, food, depression, mood, self-esteem, all of it. And so just in the last, 4 to 5 years, that has improved for me greatly. I just have started learning about carnivore on Instagram. Instagram was the main place that I learned, was the spot that I gained my knowledge there. But I'm raising 4 children, homeschool mom. I've got 3 teenagers. I've got a 10-year-old. So I'm still in the mix of it. Had my kids a little bit later in life. So most of my peer moms are 10 years younger than me, et cetera. And so that's been kind of an interesting journey, being the mom that, got that later start with everything. And so, my husband is retired Air Force, been married for 30 years. Just living each day and loving it.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm 55. I have 4 children as well, and they're 16, 14, 11, and 9. So very similar age range. And, of course, I'm later in life and I used to be in the Air Force. So kind of neat how that works. And we're both in Washington State. So pretty cool. Yep. So, I'm reading, it says, at some point, and it's hard to believe looking at you, at one point you were 300 pounds. I was 300 pounds at one point in my life, but that's probably more believable.
You might be a little bit taller than me.
I'm probably a little taller. Yeah. But so tell us about that. I mean, 300 pounds, that's an accomplishment. I remember when I achieved that, I was kind of cool about it, but then I was like, this probably isn't the best thing for me. But anyway, talk about that.
I know. I mean, those decade weights are significant weights, right? And so I definitely remember when I got over 200 pounds, that was in my 20s. That was like my freshman 35, 25, basically my whole life, I was always like, from the time I was 15, I was always my age times 10. So by the time I was 20, I'd gotten above 200. I thought that was the end of the world. Horrible to be 200 pounds. I don't know, getting to the 300 pound point, it was definitely, after I'd had my babies, the pregnancy gain, for a lot of women, you track this weight thing. This is such a big monkey in your head. How much do I weigh? Right. And so you're tracking your weight throughout your pregnancy, and your top weight at your pregnancy. A lot of times for women, when they have their consecutive children, then they get to that top pregnancy weight, but they weren't pregnant. And so it was obviously something was off. Something was off in their diet, their lifestyle overall, that they kept kind of, their body remembered, and they kept getting to this high weight point that they had only seen during their pregnancies. So that was kind of how it went for me. It got until my late 30s that I was up at that 300. And by the time I had my 4th child, I had him a little bit later at 41 years old, and I was 300 pounds at my top pregnancy weight. And so it was a little bit of a higher risk pregnancy, potentially just because of age, and then the weight kind of compounding on top of that. I was very doctor phobish. And so I didn't have the metrics. I didn't have the blood sugars. I didn't have I didn't have those tests to kind of look at other factors. It's like, I didn't want to know. I was just in my own denial. But again, Lauren had the weight come down, the weight come off, just up and down the scale constantly, had tried different things. Atkins actually had worked quite well for me when we kind of know why now, but I never was able to hang on to that. So when I got to that top weight after, again, those were just sobering moments. And so the next appointment was going to be for sleep surgery, obviously, right? This is what my friends had been doing this, and you could go to Mexico and get it done for a great price, or what. And I definitely was looking at that. I had the referral, did not make it to that first appointment. That would have been 2017. One of my old kind of dieting buddies had been like, let's just try one more time, non-surgical. We can do it. This accountability piece, this person that was wanting to show up for me and say, you and I, we're going to talk every single day and we're going to figure this out. And it happened to click that I found the right modalities and I had the right relationship and the right accountability for those pieces to come together for me when I was 46 when that happened.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And I remember for me, I mean, it was just kind of going back, and I was always like, I never had like a visible pair of abdominal muscles, even though I was an athlete. And I thought at 40, I'm going to do this at 40 finally. And it didn't work. I didn't do it. I couldn't do it. But once I discovered, some dietary changes, it finally worked. After I couldn't outwork it. And so I finally got my first set of abdominal muscles when I was, I think, 43 or so. And obviously discovering a carnivore diet certainly helped later on. But so you've lost 150 pounds. You've kept it off now for 5 years or something like that. That's
No, I haven't maintained it quite that long. I still consider myself in the maintenance journey because I'm a pretty new carnivore, Shawn. I started with fasting.
Right.
Fasting was my big aha.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked really, really well for me. I didn't get the food freedom part of it, but I got the body recomposition. And I got a lot of benefits, a lot of self-confidence, a lot of success. So carnivore and fasting together was the last 50 pounds. So, I've maintained that, I'm in honestly my first year or so. So it's a slow, steady journey for me. But I cannot wait to get to the 5-year point. I can't wait till that's part of my stories. I started 5 years ago. So I'm still in my finishing.
Yeah, I'm thinking when I'm 55, I went from 300, 290 to about 230, got to spend about 13 years that I've, not any problem. It's pretty, and I fluctuate 5 or 10 pounds here and there, but that's due because I'm trying to usually. So what, the fasting, because there's a lot of criticism around fasting right now. There's people saying, well, it doesn't make any difference. Intermittent fasting is no better than caloric restriction. In general, studies show that or seem to show that. Why do you think for you that worked?
I love Jason Fung's book and I devoured it and believed it. And I surrounded myself in community. I'm very community oriented. I'm very accountability oriented. So part of why fasting worked for me was because I always kind of did it in community. I would join groups on Facebook. We would do group fasts together. And so the thing about fasting that kept me hooked and kept me into it is understanding that there's a lot more at play besides calorie restriction, understanding the change in metabolism, understanding the health benefits. The thing that really motivated me for fasting, honestly, was when I started getting deeper into it and started learning that it can be used therapeutically on cancer journeys. Had a friend that was on a cancer journey, and I, dove into the different written works about that. And so for me, it was understanding that there's so much more to fasting than just reducing calories or restricting calories, that it wasn't a calories in, calories out equation. And so it's curious because you're right. Lately, there's so much that's coming and saying, oh, does it really work at all? And, so we kind of always have to look at these studies and evaluate. And then for some people, it's going to be contraindicated. That's not going to be a great solution for them. I was a person that came out of disordered eating, binge eating, purging, emotional eating. I never had anything diagnosed because I didn't seek that road, but I had, horrible relationship with food, and fasting was fantastic for me emotionally. It helped me so much emotionally. I think it just had to do with just taking those really good breaks from food and understanding that it was improving my health on many, many different functions. Every system in the body was improving. So it was just doing the community and having an overall health approach of why it worked for me and why I still believe in it, like people to try it out. I'm not hardened. I'm not hard about it. I feel like there's plenty of people that can do it with a very small amount of fasting. I feel that it's probably not for everybody, but I think that most people can benefit from some version of it. So I do like to present that as an option. I feel much more that the nutrition is where it's at, that the carnivore is so powerful. I think it's way more powerful than the fasting, but I like them together. I think together they work really well.
Yeah, and your thought about community is kind of interesting because there's a lot of people they'll go out and do things that aren't good for them with friends. I mean, so we're going to go out and drink too much or go out and binge eat too much or something like that. And you often surround yourself with community to do those activities. And so why not do the opposite? Do the things that potentially are more beneficial to you in a community-based focus, which, that's why we're here. I mean, we have this big community that does similar things. So at what point did you decide, hey, I want to do this carnivore thing? Because it's kind of weird. It's kind of crazy.
Oh
right?
my gosh. Well, I'm so glad it's getting less and less weird. So thanks to all of you for everything you've done to make this a viable option. It was Instagram. I was a huge fan of Brett Lloyd and JC, Lady Carnivore. So I sort of attached to these personalities that I really dove deep and learned everything I could about their journeys. So these are two of your superstars here, Shawn. So I appreciate just everything that you do to get these stories out there. The mental piece was what I craved. I could tell that I still didn't have, what we call food freedom. Even at the end of my fast, I was still having some binging kind of behaviors. I was still getting caught up in keto treats. Keto, there's too much stuff on the keto road that has the artificial sweeteners that combine sweet and fat together. And I lost control with those foods. I lost control with the nut butters. Lost control with the fake keto treats. I think throughout my whole journey, I'm always looking for the loopholes. I'm looking for, is there some way that I can, change all this and improve all this, but not really have to follow all the rules? Are there cheater rules? And so I think that journey for me just always kept my mind confused. I was still looking, still craving, still wanting the simplicity. And the lure of not having cravings was what fascinated me about carnivore. And a very good friend of mine, Tiffany Henschel, had documented her journey on a Facebook group and her mental journey and how she, the success that she had mentally throughout her carnivore journey. And so just getting that inside look and her almost a daily journal of the things that had changed over time in her life by going 100% carnivore was enough. I'm like, I got to try this. I have to see if this is like the final, finisher that's going to really make all the difference for me.
Yeah, it is interesting. You mentioned the food relationship, and that's one of the first things when I have clients I talk to. I say, look, I don't really care I care what your goal is, but I think you have to address this problem. If you're overweight, there's probably a food relationship problem, whether it's whether you want to admit it or not. It's typically there. I certainly know that was certainly there for me. I mean, and I'm a very disciplined person, and I've always been that way, but it's certainly a challenge. With regard to, you said recomposition, how did you, because it's so important, not just to lose, body weight in general, but it's also important to maintain lean mass. I mean, I talk about this all the time. Lean mass is literally gold. I mean, it's metabolic gold. And so how did you manage to, I assume you did that or
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I was thankfully, a lot of the trends right now are just wonderful trends. There's a big trend in women lifting weights and women doing, lifting heavy weights. So that I just layered that in. The virus had hit and we were stuck at home and we found a set off of Craigslist. And my daughters and I, my teenage daughters, decided to hit the iron with me. And so I wasn't very technical. I wasn't doing everything right, but I was doing it. So again, within accountability. So at some point, if my daughters kind of would fade back, then I'd pick one of my girlfriends, be like, okay, let's this many days a week, just even if we just 3 days a week, if we just show up and, sling heavy things around, that's going to make a big difference for us. So a friend of mine had shown me some basic bodybuilder moves. And so I just did some really basic push pull. I didn't even max, so I didn't do everything how every book says you're supposed to do it. It was more of a moderate stimulation, just getting that stimulus to my muscles. So that was huge. And that helped me so much. That habit has dropped off lately. I've been pretty slumpy on that. But what's interesting is I really haven't lost the muscle tone. I feel like my body gets so much protein that this animal protein has maintained my muscle mass. So I still have the shape, I still have the muscles, I still have the look. And I've been really slumpy on it. Like it's time to kind of get back to it and get that pumped up again. So resistance training has been a huge part of what makes me feel my best, for sure.
Yeah. A couple interesting points you brought up that I think are worth reiterating. You don't have to do everything perfect. There isn't if you're not doing this exercise perfectly, like the biomechanical people say, as long as you're not doing this grossly wrong where you're going to hurt yourself, but just getting an approximation and just getting there and doing really anything, depending on where you're starting. If you're starting from a very sedentary position, gosh, anything is going to give you such tremendous benefit. And the other thing I see, also with me, I can find that I may not train some aspect of my fitness, strength, conditioning. I don't lose much. It's very easy for me to get back to peak form with just, I think diet has a huge role here. And so, I just, it's kind of interesting. I hopped on a rowing machine, hadn't done it significantly yet. I pulled the fastest time in the world for my age group without even training it. So yes, there is something there to I think the high protein, high quality diet, so on and so forth. What does your diet look like? Because all these people are like, what are you eating? So what does the diet look like for you today?
Absolutely. Very beef centered. That's just kind of my basic food. In fact, I barely ever eat a meal without some beef on my plate. I like the typical, very boring and standard. I like the some butters and scrambled eggs. Those are part of the picture. If I want some variety, I'll try some salmon or some fish or some chicken thighs. I'll do a lot of chicken thighs because we feed it to our pets and it's around a lot. So we'll supplement with some chicken thighs on the plate. But I usually keep a pretty varied plate, some dairy, some cheese that comes in and out. I try to keep it out, but it tends to sneak back in. Doesn't seem to be harming me much. So, it's very, very beef oriented. My husband, he's gone carnivore now and he makes up every morning. He does a standard. So he does like 6 beef patties, does some cheese and some bacon and makes these like patty bacon sandwiches and has those, every day for his lunch. So we're pretty accustomed. The whole family has like our kind of favorite things that we do a lot of freezer to air fryer to keep it simple. We've got 2 air fryers out available for whoever wants to cook themselves meat whenever they want. And we keep chicken wings available. My little guy likes those a lot of bacon, a lot of chicken wings, a lot of beef.
So are you going out of your way to eat a lot of like organ meats, raw organ meats, any of that stuff part of your diet?
None of it. No. I got to go on a retreat with Rebecca Farmer a couple months ago. And that was my first time tasting that stuff. And her stuff, of course, was all lamb. So no, it hasn't been a priority at all. And I'm about 18 months carnivore and I haven't seemed to have any issue without supplementing with organs.
Yeah, and that seems to be what the data shows. If you're familiar with the Harvard University study that came out, and same thing they saw didn't seem to make a difference. And I know there's people that advocate for that, but I've said, look, from the beginning, and I think the people that have been doing this for the longest, the people that sort of inspired me would say the same thing. That it's unnecessary. So it's interesting to see that is being pushed as a narrative. Do you? What was I going to ask there? So your husband what prompted your husband to to do carnivore now? Was it to seeing your results?
Yeah. Well, he wanted to see if he could get like a fungus thing to resolve. It's like, well, you could try carnivore for 6 months and just see. And I didn't even tell him, because I did the whole 30 days when I started it. Then I felt so good, continued, and on it went. And so I challenged him to do a longer challenge, and it has helped for sure. He has I don't with something on his toe. I can't remember what that is, but so that it has resolved. But what's so great though is he's gotten into the weights as well, and he has had an incredible body recomp. I've never seen his body look like this. He has so much musculature. He tends to be a little smaller in the shoulders, and his shoulders have broadened out, and he's got a lot of muscle that's coming on there. And he uses the weights downstairs, but he doesn't get sore now. He said that he just really pushes them and pushes hard, and never gets the delayed onset muscular, doesn't get that afterwards. So yeah, I think it was just watching how much better I felt and experimenting. I don't know for sure that he's going to stay 100%. He kind of committed to doing it for a while. He got the DEXA scan. So we'll probably at the end of that get a second scan, see what difference it made for him. But he looks so good. And he was with his family not too long ago, and his brother and the brother's partner decided that they're going to try carnivore just solely based on Joel's look. And he was not an overweight person. He's a smaller person, but he just looked so filled out, and his skin looks healthy and his body looks healthy. So he's gaining converts just by hanging out and being him. So.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you're eating bacon and burger patties and stuff like that. And I don't know if you mentioned eggs in there, perhaps butter. And all these things are, they're high in saturated fats. We're told they're going to kill us. And yet, you've lost a lot of weight. Your husband's putting on muscle, skin's better. Fungal infections are going away. I'm sure you've had a lot of positive things. Are you concerned about, hey man, I'm eating a lot of saturated fat?
No, I have no concern. I celebrate that I get to eat saturated fat. I think that, it seems that the studies that are out there that are showing otherwise is compound factor. It's eating all these saturated fats with a bunch of horrible other foods in combination that's probably going to get you into trouble. So no, I feel very confident. I think fat is so important. I think it's just absolutely necessary for our hormones, for our mood, for our satiety, for the signals of our cell walls. I am very pro fat. I think it's a beautiful thing to be eating a lot of saturated fat in the diet.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I eat a lot of. I've got a big giant brisket that I'm smoking today, so I'm looking forward to having that. And there's a lot of great fat on that there. Do you physicians? Do you have any physicians that follow you now, or is that part of your?
What's interesting right now is when I did one of my ops just at my local provider, that one of the staff members on there had tried carnivore for a little bit. And so I think just within my local system, the providers here are pretty open to it, pretty open-minded. And we had noticed that he was very similar to my husband, and that he's a very lean person. And we just noticed that out of nowhere, this physician assistant just popped muscles and jawline, and his skin looked really great. And we're like, he's been doing something. What's been going on? And so somebody else in the office said, oh yeah, he tried carnivore. That's why he looks so different. It's like, okay, there's a look. But yeah, so I got to meet Dr. Barry a couple months ago, and Dr. Kills is quite frequent in Bella's gang and everything. So we get to see him quite a bit too. So, I just love this. I love that there are more and more people that have the right letters. Thank you, Dr. Baker, that are telling people, this is absolutely something you could consider that could make a night and day difference in your life. So the more that happens, it's just wonderful to get that message out.
Yeah, it is cool to see more and more physicians embracing this and getting the results. It's, like I said, if it's something that did not work and was quote unquote fad, which a lot of people claim it doesn't, then we would expect it to not work. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to work quite well. And so we'll continue doing this. And what about, you said you've got 4 kids. Are any of those kids interested in this? Are they?
Absolutely.
Sure eating a lot of meat,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's such this life balance because, my world kind of right now is I love y'all. I love these online communities. Like I really, my world, social world has kind of shifted to hanging out with meat people all the time. And so that in their world has not. Of course, they're just normal teenagers going to school, going to college, and all these kind of circles. So that's the rub for them. So my daughter is very interested in mental health. She read Judy Cho's book cover to cover. It was very informative to us about, the benefits of carnivore for that journey. So yeah, they feel better. They just feel so much better the more meat-based they are. I can't tell for sure, but I love that they're still at home. I love that we were able to provide this diet for them during formative years. And so to me, it's just like putting it in the toolbox for them, that it's always going to be available for them as an option. They can literally see what happens on their face, what happens, they'll have breakouts, the more they're doing the other stuff, the more kind of symptoms and exhaustion they actually do feel. And so just for them to have that personal experience early in their life makes me really glad that they've been exposed to it.
Yeah, you say hopefully they have the option. I have concerns that people want to take away that option from us, as we see this continued push towards, we have to all cut back on eating meat because the planet needs saving somehow from cow farts boiling the ocean, apparently is what the belief is. Do you, okay, let me talk about this. You seem very happy. I can just tell you're smiling, you're happy, you're excited. Has the diet impacted your mental health at all?
Oh, tremendous. I mean, I just can't even night and day difference, which was a huge draw to it as well. Yeah, a lifelong issue with depression. I've been medicated, during that, taking antidepressants. Haven't had to go near any of that. Not that I don't have for some people, for specific reasons, that's really important. I'll share something super vulnerable that just happened this week, Shawn, just to give you a feel for what has happened for how I cope with things, is that, I have a trauma background, I have abuse background, and that person who I had not spoken to for 20 years died yesterday, actually. And so it was just this wild thing of not racing to the food to deal with that. So I'm in touch with all my old siblings, the step siblings, all of this, my biological father. And so this was like incredible just to have a day and have the real emotions of something that is foundational, is a day that will shake everything. And to not go back into binge behavior, to not do any kind of tearing myself down behavior, to not go spiral into pools of miserable addictive that causes more addictive. And then you have to deal with the addiction on top of what's all underneath it. I felt like having the carnivore tools helped me to actually just cope with the real pain that was underneath it on, day one. Now I'm on day 2. So we'll see, that will just kind of unfold as it unfolds. But this is how I feel. I feel like cleaning up the diet, taking out the carbs, the sugar, the food addiction, it just like clears the slate for you to actually deal with, to not be scared of your emotions and to allow yourself to have the emotions and to allow them to pass through you, and to let your food just be food, to have your nourishment just be nourishment, to have food not just be one more way that you cope. And so it was a big moment and it was a big day, and it just kind of made me feel like this feels very permanent. This feels like the fact that I could go through something so stressful and not turn it to the food was foundational. So yes, mental health has been incredibly improved throughout this. And, I love talking about it. So that makes me happy as well. I'm sure I'm not always quite this chipper, but, being in this environment is very energizing for me. And that was definitely why I tried carnivore, was for the mental health benefits. And it has not let me down in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's great. And I see a lot of people echo that. Let me ask you, because a lot of people, they're dealing with food addiction. You mentioned binge eating disorder. And you said when you're on keto, you still had this sort of temptation to eat the keto snacks and treats. And obviously, like any marketing opportunity, the people that sell processed food utilize it. And you can go through any grocery store and see keto this, keto that. And it's all basically junk food. I look at them like this is just complete junk food with a sort of a health wash label on it. And it's going to be the same thing with vegan diets and the same thing with whatever. We saw it through primal and paleo, and that all that stuff never stops. Harder to do with carnivore. It's pretty hard to make fully carnivore foods that are truly junk foods. I think it's pretty difficult to do that. I'm sure some people will try. Do you, so when you went from keto to fasting and now carnivore, if you, and maybe you don't get them, but if you have, like, say there's a craving that pops up, and a lot of people have to deal with this, and I talk to them about you need to have some tools in your tool chest to deal with that. How do you deal with that in the assumption that maybe it's still from time to time, you're like, hey, that piece of pizza looks really good, or that fruit or chocolate or whatever. How do you deal with that currently?
Oh, absolutely. I deal with that preventively. Okay. So if I'm in a fast, that's a little different because that's a time set aside. I am so aware of cravings. For the most part, I don't have cravings, but I nourish myself so fully every day. I do what's called front loading. I eat early in the day just to get ahead of stress, binges, triggers, anything like that. I don't actually binge anymore, but to get ahead of those kinds of cravings. So I always just make sure that I have readily meat that is available. And so if I'm on a traveling thing, I'm going to double up on how much meat and, jerkies, or there's always a step of thinking ahead in this. And so you're trying to get ahead of the event, of the trigger, of the binge. I don't keep that keto food in the house anymore, although I don't think I would want it if I did. Early on, I really actually like people to use butter, and I, have the brown butter recipe, these little butter discs that you can just keep available and ready. And so I encourage early in the process, when people are first stepping out of that, I actually completely support Raymond's whole concept of this feasting. Of course, you support this too, Shawn. Everybody does. Dr. Berry does. Everybody does. But, he's kind of designed this very specific priming where you go for 2 weeks. You really, really overnourish. So I think that that's really important for people beginning. Anytime those cravings come back, I actually think it's a sign that they could be undernourished and not eating enough. And so to me, it's a telltale sign to just start with a nice, comfortably full meal again and commit yourself to having the resources available. You're making your decisions ahead of time. That's what this is all about. And so you're going to have these moments, but if you've decided ahead of time, I have something I can quickly prepare, or I have something that's already prepared, then you are ahead of the curve on that. So yeah, I think it has to do with, cravings can be a sign of the undernourishment. It might be a sign to step up and feast a little bit more and go back into a feasting mode. And then always being prepared with your butter discs, or, something fatty, or meat is going to be a really great way to handle that.
How much protein do you eat on a day? Is there a protein amount you like to get daily?
Yeah, I currently don't track, but it's going to be a lot. If I had to, it's going to be probably upwards of 200 grams. It's a lot. I eat big and I eat a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You make 200 grams. You're probably at least 2 pounds of meat in, and that's. I mean, most women would recoil in horror at the thought of having to eat 2 pounds. Or no, I don't know about having to eat or getting to eat that much. I mean, it is a lot of food. I mean, that's, and yet you're still maintaining significant weight loss with that. Does that feel good? I mean, a lot of people say, "Well, a carnivore diet is so restrictive." My God, aren't you bored by this stuff? What do you say when people ask you that?
I love the simplicity. I love that I don't have to overthink things. I love that I can streamline it and just have it, ready to go. And I love that my metabolism's so high that I can put away food like that. But I'm very intuitive, because that doesn't, I can trust my appetite at this point. And so I'll have days that are big feasting days like that. And then I'll have days, that are not much at all. So it does go up and down for sure. But overall, I just consider myself to have a robust appetite. And I'm aware of the thermogenic effect of protein as well, that I'm aware that not all of this, some of it is burned up as it's digested. And so that probably helps me a little bit mentally, although I don't even really need to go on that road anymore. But no, I love coming into a lifestyle that is so generous that I just get to eat so freely and generously. It doesn't feel like restriction at all. I don't have any desire for non-carnivore foods. I'm like, doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
Yeah. And are you making an attempt to eat only sort of grass finished meat, or is it just what other grain finished
No,
stuff?
not yet. Not to say that won't be in my future, but no, it's just like, gosh, we've got 6 kids at home and expenses are insane. So we just do the big loss leads, right? So we scour the sales, and if there's certain cuts on sale, we keep 4 freezers going. So we have one that's specifically for beef, and then we just have sections where we keep all of our different and we have a food saver, like a vacuum seal. So we'll do massive kind of processing days if we get the great sale and get the good deals. And we do a lot of ground beef. Brett always has these pictures with these beautiful big 20-pound logs that he gets. And we do that too. And we'll cook them up. We'll do half of it taco meat, half of it non-seasoned. And that's just always available in the fridge, always ground beef available for a snack. And so heat it up, put some cheese on it. You're good to go. Make a taco, make some nachos, turn it into a soup real quick. So a lot of our success has been food prepping and keeping that food available, but we have had tons of benefit. Just having regular grocery store meat has been completely fine for our family.
Yeah. And that's another thing I've seen. I know there's people that advocate for, only grass finished. And I tell people, hey, look, people get plenty of success with plain old supermarket meat. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's still a superfood. I think it is completely a superfood. How much? So speaking of that, other people say, well, it's too expensive. And you mentioned cost, but has your cost gone up significantly since you started doing this diet? All things considered, are you spending more money as a whole, or is it?
I don't think so. All things considered. So I think that going ground beef, we do a lot of chicken thighs. We do the sales. We do a lot of like the chicken quarters, and so there's still some very reasonable cuts that you can get out that the family enjoys, and that is delicious and nourishing. So overall, I do think there's probably been a little bit of an increase for us, but it's not as bad as you would think, because we only shop in one section of the grocery store, and there's no processed food. There's nothing in a box, or even that food just doesn't exist in our house. And so I think overall it's not as much of an increase as you'd think.
Yeah, that's something I saw as well, because when some of these processed foods are just ridiculously expensive for what they deliver. I mean, from a nutrition and a satiety standpoint, you have to eat far more of it. You probably overall volume of food you probably eat has gone down. I would probably imagine. If you look in like the trash cans, when I have people visiting from out of town that are on plant-based, one of my relatives was vegetarian, they would come in and stay and bring the family. Our trash, production would go up fourfold. I mean, the trash can would just fill up because of all the packaging and all the ingredients, and
Shawn,
they're constantly eating. But anyway, what, you'd mentioned the community that you do outside of being a mom. Are you doing anything else specifically with regard to diet and nutrition?
Run the question by me one more time. You mean, that I help over with Bella? Yeah. So I do some coaching. Yeah, not very much. So I help with Bella. We have very similar to what y'all are doing. And so I'm just available as a resource there. So I'm just like, hey, I'm an 18-month carnivore. I'm a mom. I'm, always cooking and feeding these kids. And so, I love to just be available to kind of troubleshoot as a resource for people, just as an experience. I don't have a degree in nutrition. I'm not a doctor, nothing like that. I'm just somebody that has had a life changed by eating meat-based. And I love to problem solve with people and to be in accountability. I'm definitely available to help people in accountability, coming up with their version of how they want to go about this as well.
Do you get into, some people really get creative with cooking, and, they're making all these neat sort of chaffles. And I know Bella does her egg pudding, I think she calls it. Have you played with any of that stuff for your kids or something like that?
Sure. Yeah, a little bit. Anything I can do to make it more fun for the kids, then we like to do that. Like for, around the Christmas time, we all made little crafty houses out of meat, little meat cabins and things like that. And so making a little theme to it is enjoyable. I tend to just pick like 1 or 2 recipes that I love and repeat that. I tend to really love the simplicity. I actually love Kelly Hogan's Oopsie Cake. So we've been making a lot of Oopsie Cake lately. But I haven't taken it that full thing where you're making pasta out of things and you're making fake breads out of things. I can't stand that bread. It's so nasty, but I can see a lot of people liking the egg white bread, so not too much, but my daughters play around with it for sure. And we just kind of vary the spices for the most part.
Yeah. I've seen some people making, breads out of chicken. And I think I actually did that one time. It's kind of funny because my son, who's, I think he was 8 at the time or 9, I made this bread out of chicken. And I was always like, hey, make sure you're eating your meat. And he wanted another piece of the chicken bread. And I remember mom was saying, hey, stop eating so much bread. You need to eat meat. And I was like, well, it's meat. It's fine, because it's made out of chicken there. So it was kind of,
we do the pizza crust out of chicken. That's pretty good.
Yeah. There's some recipes on that. We've got some, I know we've got some on our website, but, well, what about, are you on social media? Do you, you met people on social media?
Yeah. That's a melt.that.snow, melt that snow. And so I just have an Instagram account. And then people can reach out to me on email if they're interested, if they have questions or want feedback on things as well.
Okay. Well, let me just, I'm going to look on my list and see if anybody has a question for you.
Awesome.
A lot of questions, a lot of comments here. Yeah, just about mental health and stuff, and some nice comments. Yeah, okay. There's Charlie who's asking. This is a question. Are you so on his when you're on Instagram or whatever, Twitter or whatever, and I'm on all these things, you do get some people that disagree with you, and some of them are not very nice about it. Are you running into any of that, or has it been pretty? It seems like
a little bit. The main one that's out there that seems to come after the carnivore ladies, I actually took it as a badge of honor. It's like, oh, good, I finally got, someone finally noticed me. She goes by the meat police. So that one has been on my account, bugging me here and there. But she kind of came after Raymond too, and but she's actually interesting. Her perspective is interesting. It hasn't been super harmful or hurtful or spiteful in any way, but Bella's a really great example. She's just like just don't give it any attention. That feeds it. If we had anything like that, then we haven't. I don't give it a lot of attention. I feel like there's so much good and positivity. This story, how people's lives are being changed by eating meat. To me, the anecdotes are so powerful. And so there's just, there's 95 stories of like, wow, this has improved. They're not always, gee, I got skinny. It's sometimes there's frustration in that process. That process seems to be slow and you needs to require a lot of patience and consistency to kind of get that recomp journey. But it's been mostly positive from where I've stood so far. And I have a lot of support and a lot of great minds that if for some reason I have a bump into that I feel will be in my corner.
Yeah, I feel a little underperformer. I have not had the meat police go after me yet so far. So maybe they were used a different name and they eventually got blocked. So I usually just entertain them for a few months and then I end up using just blocking when they get too obnoxious. But last question for you, for people that are like maybe considering a carnivore diet, but they're worried or they don't know how to start, what advice would you give them if somebody came, hey, I want to try this? What would you tell them?
Oh man, reach out for support, find some buddies that are kind of in the beginning phase as well. I actually love, and I don't know why this is, maybe Shawn, because of what you've created here. Like for some, you've been such a leader in this and you created these community meetings. I've noticed that in carnivore, so many people are doing this. There's so many now. And so it's really easy and accessible to, grab some coaching. You've made that so accessible. It's super easy to join a group where you actually get to do this in community. There's a lot of people that are doing these ones. They're for free too. There's a lot of people that are hosting free just come and learn together. So my advice has to do with that. Finding these community groups. They're all so wonderful. I pop in as many of them as I can because I get such a high from the energy that are here in these types of communities. And I would just say that patients, throw out the scale, please. This is a healing first protocol, and the scale is not going to be a great friend on this journey. And so I really hope that they can just toss that part of it, and reach out for community, and to just be patient and to keep it simple. It's very, very simple, that you can't get any simpler than this. I think this is why people are so drawn to this.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like nutrition should require all kinds of, calculations. It should be pretty simple. Anyway, Emily, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's Melt the Snow. What is it again? Melt the Snow.
Melt That Snow.
Melt That Snow on Instagram. You guys check that out. For the rest of you guys, we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for being here. And anytime you want to stop by the community, we'd love to have you in here. We'll see everybody else tomorrow. Take care, Emily. Bye-bye.
Thank you.